So, Don Brothers episode 38. What the fuck did I just watch? This episode was all over the place, but in a good way. It was wacky, it was silly, it was goofy, it was serious at some points, it had a good theme to it. But it's also just a fun, wacky adventure episode to set up for something more serious coming later down the line for next week. So, the whole premise for this episode is all over the place. It starts off with some lady who wants the best meal, and then she turns into a monster of the week and she starts eating people, and then she blacks out, and then she wakes up and realizes that she's getting a bit bigger. And then the next day you sort of cut to, well, after the opening, you cut to Inuzuka at the police station telling Kaito's aunt about the forest that he was at, and he's a free man now, he's free to go. And you have this scene where Inuzuka's walking down the street, he's like, oh, it feels so good not to have a bounty on my head, and he walks up to a police officer, and then flinches, and he's like, oh wait, I don't have to run away from him anymore. And then the police officer puts a new bounty for Inuzuka up on the wall, but it was when he was possessed by the bestial, not possessed, the bestial clone ran around as him, sort of tearing up the restaurants. And that's what the bounty's up there for. So once again, he's on the run for the police, but I'm sure the bounty isn't that serious and it can probably get waived. So after he escapes from the police, he runs into Kijino, and Kijino's like, hey, check out Miho, she came home again. And Inuzuka's like, oh, okay then, let's go see her. And then it cuts to Kijino showing Inuzuka, well, I think there was a scene in between that, but after that, you basically see Kijino showing Inuzuka the doll that he showed off at the end of last week's episode. It's like, this is my beautiful wife, this is Miho, let's go out to dinner, just the three of us. And you can just tell that Kijino's not all there. But then after that, you sort of cut to frickin' Jiro and his childhood friend, I forget her name, but she's like, oh, sorry I was such a bother, or hopefully I wasn't a bother this whole time while I stayed with you. I was like, bitch, we only saw you for like 2 episodes, and then you're off screen for most of it. What did you guys get up to? But no, she basically stayed with him, and she cooked him a meal that she left in the fridge, which is going to have payoff at the end of the episode for a funny joke. So after that, it then cuts to everyone else sort of whining and dining, and I got the vibes from that one episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia where the gang dines out, and you think they're all over different places of the restaurant, but actually it's just one long table and they're just sort of arguing with each other. You've got Feral Jiro arguing with Momotaro, and he's like, fight me, let's take this outside, and Tara's like, no. And then you have Kijino breaking down because Inuzuka called Miho a doll, and he's like, my wife isn't a doll, it's real. And then you've got Saru brother hard pressing Haruka about her hanging out with Sonoza, and she's trying to explain that Sonoza is a manga editor. And then after that, the chef comes out and tells them to shut up because they're being too loud. And then it weirdly turns into like My Kitchen Nightmares, where Inuzuka is sort of like occupying the freaking kitchen, and then they start having a cook-off, and then it turns into Iron Chef. And then the episode gets all kind of weird because it's like, oh, let's cook an omelette, and they go to some farm to get the best eggs, and suddenly Sonoi's there. Why is Sonoi there? No idea, but you find out at the end of the episode. But then it turns really wacky and really goofy where they transform and they start fighting over the eggs, and then the eggs break. And then after that, they have more cooking adventures. And then the monster of the week shows up and then starts eating. It basically eats Inuzuka and the chef. And then they go inside of the monster of the week. And we kind of see the pocket dimension of where people go when they get sucked into them, which is a really cool concept. I don't think we've seen that in the show until now. Like, we've seen people get sucked up, and we've seen the pocket dimension of where they used to go when Sonoi killed them or destroyed them, but now we see it with a freaking monster of the week, and they walk through this forest area, and what do they find? Well, they find the Helheim fruit from freaking Kamen Rider Gaim, except it's painted blue. And as soon as you know, like, it's very noticeable that it's the Helheim props fruit that are basically painted blue. but when you look at it, it's like, oh shit, don't eat that. But then they do eating it. They like cook fine meals out of it. They cook blue spaghetti and paste out of it. But yeah, like they have this big showdown with the monster of the week and the freaking Noito, and then Murasame shows up, and then Murasame transforms into that ugly fucking CGI Megazord. Because when you see that ugly freaking Don Murasame Megazord, then you see the freaking ugly CGI. It looked better in this episode, I will say that, but it is noticeably bad in some sense. I think it's basically the color palette of what Don Murasame is when it turns into like Don Murasame Oji Taijin. Like when it's that freaking black and purple, it doesn't really stand out compared to the freaking bright colors of all of our heroes. But I'm not a fan of the CGI mech fight we get when Don Oji Taijin shows up. I guess they didn't want to make another mech suit, but they just did this freaking ugly CGI. I'm not a fan of it. I've said it several times. I'm not a fan of its design. I'm not a fan of the CGI design. The mech design looks freaking cool. I love that toy. I'd get it if it wasn't $200. But it's not my favorite, like, it's not my favorite mech design in the show. But yeah, they fight Murasame, they defeat it, and all is well, where they start cooking the food and they have a fun old time. Yeah, I'm basically recapping this episode because I don't know what to say about this episode apart from it's wacky, silly fun. But yeah, the episode ends with everyone sort of dancing around because the food's so good. And then it ends with Jiro sharing the cooked meal that his childhood friend made with Taro. And Taro sort of shoots up into the sky and flies around Tokyo Tower. It's a really nice scene. It's so wacky and Disney. I love it. But yeah, that's basically where the episode ends. Although it does end with Sonoe going to the ramen place or the Odin shop, and he eats the egg and then he teleports away and starts bouncing around in the Brain People world or the Noito world, and the other's like, what's his problem? And that's where the episode ends. So yeah, this episode was really wacky, really goofy, really silly. Oh no, that wasn't where the episode ends. The episode ends with Kichino going home talking to the doll, and then Miho Natsumi shows up, and that was a big shocker for me because I didn't think she'd return so soon, but something must be up if she returned again. But yeah, that's basically where the episode ends. Miho Natsumi shows up, and then it shows the next week's episode preview. So this episode wasn't bad. It was just really wacky, silly, goofy fun. And the show is entering its endgame later down the line. We're probably going to be entering its endgame come January, at least, because we're nearly in the 40s, so we've got to get closer to that endgame of the show. So all the pieces are slowly lining up. And I might make an episode preview breakdown for episode 39. Although Don Brother episode previews are very clickbaity and foolish, because they make it seem like bad things are going to happen or terrible things are going to happen, but then it's like wacky, silly, goofy. But yeah, Don Brothers episode 38, I think this episode was overall fine. Don't know what else to say about it, but it was really wacky, goofy, fun. Check it out if you want to. I think I had a lot of fun with it, and if you guys had a lot of fun with it, that's great to know. So with that said, I think I'm going to bring this video to a close. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out, take care, bye.